Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm a little bit late. Was on the phone. And so now I'm trying to pull stuff up right now so we can discuss Kathleen's reply from today on the whole bone thing. So let me get it pulled up over here on my other screen so we'll read through it together and then discuss. Let me find it while my screen, sorry, scrolling down to find it. There it is. It is posted here, and let me bring it up. You better come over on this side of the page, otherwise. There we go. Oh, let me turn the sound off my phone. And it is, okay. So here we go. And I see Christy is here already. So if you have any questions while I go through and I'm reading this, Christy will be here to answer you while I'm reading this stuff that I obviously can't go back and forth between what you guys are posting and what I'm reading. So this was filed today. And it says, now comes defendant appellant. I'm going to hold this while I'm reading right now. This little, you're my boy blue microphone. Now comes defendant appellant Stephen A. Avery through his attorneys, Kathleen T. Zellner and Stephen G. Richards, and for his reply to the state's response in opposition to his motion to stay the appeal and remand the cause to the circuit court states as follows. Introduction. The state's response conveys an attitude of impunity for its past actions of withholding exculpatory evidence and its current action of continuing the concealment of its destruction of potentially exculpatory or useful evidence. A lot of big words in that very first paragraph. When the state disclosed a CD of violent porn from the Dassey Yanda computer 12 years after the CD was created and concealed from prior counsel, the state argued, as it does now, that Mr. Avery was attempting to add new material to his motion. This court did not accept that disingenuous response then, and it should not now accept the state's current disingenuous response, which echoes the same argument. So, not new. The state wants this court to overlook the undisputed fact that 2 weeks ago, on December 28, 2018, when it filed its response to Mr. Avery's request for new DNA testing of the bones from the Manitowoc gravel pit, it never once admitted or disclosed that it had given the bones back to the Hallback family in 2011 without notice to Mr. Avery or his counsel. Instead, the state carried on in its charade of concealment by claiming that Mr. Avery could voluntarily dismiss his pending appeal. The state's response specifically stated, quote, the state notes that Avery has the option to voluntarily dismiss this appeal if he wishes to litigate a Wisconsin statute motion now. If he chooses to do so, and if the circuit court grants DNA testing that produces exculpatory results, it is possible that some or all of the issues raised in the Avery's Wisconsin statute, blah, 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 filings will become moot. Alternatively, if Avery is not confident that his Wisconsin statute motion will be successful or not confident that testing will produce exculpatory results, he should wait and see if he prevails on appeal. Doesn't that just sound crazy too? I'm sorry, just he should wait. Why he should wait? He should wait. Steve, because Stephen hasn't done any waiting. He should wait. Sorry. He should wait and see if he prevails on appeal and then decide if it is necessary to litigate a Wisconsin statute blah blah motion. A movement can bring a Wisconsin statute blah blah motion at any time after conviction or adjudication, unquote. What the state fails to mention in its helpful guidance to Mr. Avery is that it facilitated the destruction in 2011 of the very evidence that Mr. Avery would be hoping to test if he was so foolish as to voluntarily dismiss his current appeal. The state has not been prejudiced in any way by the delays granted to Mr. Avery as a result of the state's misconduct in withholding and facilitating the destruction of material evidence. The state wants this court to turn a blind eye to these actions and focus instead on Mr. Avery's actions in seeking a second delay in filing his brief. Given that this case spans 12 years post-trial, the request of an inmate serving a life sentence without parole in seeking 2 delays based on recently discovered, suppressed, and destroyed evidence hardly constitutes a threat to the orderly administration of justice in the state of Wisconsin. If Mr. Avery waited to raise this current claim until after his appeal was concluded, the state would undoubtedly argue that he had failed to show a sufficient reason for not raising the issue sooner. As a result of the state's actions in concealing and withholding the Dassey Yonda CD and concealing the return of bones to the Hallback family, Mr. Avery has been forced to delay his appeal and therefore his quest for a new trial and eventual freedom. Mr. Avery's motions are not dilatory. Is that how you say that word, dilatory? The state, in its response to Mr. Avery's motion to stay the appeal and remand the cause, suggests that Mr. Avery's motions to remand for further proceedings are intended to perpetually delay this appeal. This suggestion is belied by the record. Including the instant motion, Mr. Avery has pursued 2 motions to stay the appeal and remand for further proceedings, and 1 motion to supplement the record, on which this court ordered proceedings in the circuit court. Mr. Avery maintains that each of these motions raised, oh my God, another really big word, meritorious. Is that the word? Meritorious? I don't know. I'm not a genius. Sorry, I can't read these words. Claims for relief based upon issues relating to his original blah blah motion and supplements. Indeed, Mr. Avery has not filed these motions to delay this court or unduly postpone his appeal. Instead, Mr. Avery has filed his motions to apprise this court of ongoing due process and discovery violations that, only after months of litigating Mr. Avery's post-conviction motion and its appeal, have recently been discovered. These motions are not intended for delay. This motion for stay and remand is analogous to Mr. Avery's previous motion to supplement the record in connection with an alleged due process violation. Mr. Avery has previously moved this court for a remand to the circuit court to litigate motions to supplement the record with a previously withheld CD containing unique violent pornography search material from the Dassey computer. In that motion, Mr. Avery asked this court for leave to supplement his motion with the content of a CD containing the results of a forensic examination of the Dassey computer. Neither the CD nor its contents had ever been produced to Mr. Avery or his defense team at any stage of his criminal proceedings. In that instance, this court retained jurisdiction, but remanded the case to the circuit court for Mr. Avery to file a supplemental post-conviction motion. Because Mr. Avery's allegations relate to issues already raised in the underlying record, the same outcome is appropriate here. And sorry, I have to move because I can't ever sit still. Because this court originally remanded for scientific testing so that test results could be included in Mr. Avery's motion, distracted by a message. The state was on notice that Mr. Avery intended to test the suspected human pelvic bones recovered from the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Mr. Avery's 2015 appeal concluded on September 8, 2016, when this court remanded the case to the circuit court for post-conviction scientific testing of evidence. Among the evidence, Mr. Avery asked the circuit court to test where the suspected human pelvic bones collected in the Manitowoc County gravel pit under Calumet County property number 8675. Therefore, the state has been on notice that Mr. Avery wished to obtain the Manitowoc County gravel pit bones for several years. The state fails to acknowledge that Mr. Avery is appealing the circuit court's error in abusing its discretion in denying Mr. Avery's motion to vacate its October 3rd, 2017 order additional scientific testing. Moreover, the Manitowoc County gravel pit bones were a subject of the September 18, 2017 agreement, wherein the parties agreed to further scientific testing. Thus, the state's claim that the instant motion is devoid of foundation in the record is specious. Oh my gosh, I cannot read these words. Mr. Avery has been petitioning the circuit court for testing of the Manitowoc County gravel pit bones for years. With such a foundation in the record on appeal, the state's response in opposition to Mr. Avery's motion should be denied. The state should not benefit from concealing a report, failing to give notice, and facilitating the destruction of biological evidence. The state's opposition to Mr. Avery's motion is tantamount to asking this court to sanction a rule where prosecutor may hide, defendant must seek. Such a rule is not tenable in a system constitutionally bound to accord defendants due process. After all, the state, in its response to Mr. Avery's motion, makes no effort to deny the due process violations Mr. Avery alleges, i.e., that the state concealed a police report, failed to give statutorily mandated notice to Mr. Avery and his attorneys of its intent to destroy biological evidence, then facilitated the destruction of the same evidence. The state should not now reap the benefit of its past statutory and due process violations. Such an outcome would contravene the sense of basic fairness inherent in our justice system. Conclusion. Wherefore, undersigned counsel respectfully requests that this court enter an order staying this appeal and remanding the cause to the circuit court for proceedings to determine whether the state has violated Wisconsin statute 968.205 and Youngblood versus Arizona, dated this first day of February 2019. Kathleen. So, that's it. Sorry, really thirsty today. So, it's again, these bones. It's showing you that multiple times now the state has covered things up. So they covered up the CD that came off of Bobby Dassey's computer that showed all those disgusting pictures, dead girls, raping babies, that when they were going after Stephen, the thing they were using is they're trying to say he's like the sexual deviant, and that's why he targeted Teresa. But then when they search Stevens, they don't find anything like that other than stuff of him and his then girlfriend. But there it all was on Bobby Dassey's computer that was in his bedroom. So the state covers that up, that Bobby is somebody who could possibly be the last person that saw Teresa Halbach alive. He testifies that he saw her that day, and he has all that nasty stuff on his computer, yet it's not looked into. So there was a CD, there was the DVDs, 6 DVDs and 1 CD, right? Is that the number of them? And Sweaty Sweat Sweat turned over the DVDs, but not the CD. So that Kathleen doesn't know about until years later. And now you have the gravel pit pelvic bone. We've talked about this before in here, that gravel pit is not what's right behind the quarry or the salvage yard. You've got salvage yard, quarry, gravel pit. So this bone was found in the gravel pit. That Sweaty Sweat Sweat did his Jedi mind trick of, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Don't look at these bones. I don't even want to spend 20 seconds on these bones. We don't know if they're animal or human or nothing. They're nothing. Nobody look at these bones that are in the gravel pit. Let's only look at what's in the quarry and the salvage yard. But then they gave those bones to the Halbach family, which the law says that as long as somebody is incarcerated, all of the evidence needs to remain in storage to be used for further testing, etc., which Kathleen is stating in this response that they agreed that these should be tested. And now they're trying to block them from being tested. But so you don't know for sure what her motive is on doing this. Is it because she really does want to try and get these bones? But I do not. I think that's a case of you can't put the genie back in the bottle, even though you can put the genie back in the bottle, right? Isn't it? But the chain of custody has been broken. So now you could state that if they were to exhume Teresa Halbach's coffin, somebody could say, well, how do you know those are the bones that was given to the funeral home? That's why you have to have that constant chain of custody where stuff is sealed, and then any time it goes into somebody's hands, they have to initial and date it of this is where this was at all times. And now you've just given this evidence to this family to bury, but you're claiming that's not Teresa Halbach. So why are those bones going to the Halbach family? So I don't think she can get, even if she can get those bones, there's nothing she can do with them. So, but what you are showing is Stephen did not get his due process because they're giving away evidence that could prove he's innocent. So they're covering stuff that proves there's another suspect that should be looked at. They're hiding what's on Bobby Dassey's computer. So we still wait for the court's decision on this. I don't know if we're going to be getting something or that if we'll be getting another response from the state and then we're waiting on the court, or how this all works. This constant ping pong back and forth of, your turn, back and forth and back and forth. It's really crazy. So I don't get our law process, because there is so much here that shows that, well, I believe Stephen, the door should just be open and Stephen Brendan get to walk out right now. And, Wisconsin changes its name to Avery land. But if you're not going to go that far, they should at least get new trials. And I don't know what you get Brendan on, because I believe his confession should be thrown out because it was forced. So what do you have on Brendan other than his confession? And what do you have on Stephen besides all this doctored evidence, implanted evidence? There's nothing. All you have is that Teresa Hallback was at the salvage yard that day. Nothing else. So we're still on a waiting game. This doesn't, this isn't good or bad. I saw that comment earlier, somebody asking, is this good or bad? It's neither. It's more of, Kathleen putting people in their place, and having to point out the obvious over and over again of, you hid this CD of Bobby's computer and you hid this bone, because it makes no sense on why would you ever take Teresa or parts of Teresa, however you're going to do it, all the way to the gravel pit, and then is he leaving breadcrumbs to find his way back? I'll leave some in the quarry, and I'm going to leave some out here, and then I'm going to put some stuff in my burn pit and some in my burn barrel. Oh, and I'll throw some in my sister's burn barrel too. Makes no sense, other than whatever happened to her happened out in that area, and then somebody wanting to frame Stephen brought that stuff back. You're not going to do something elsewhere and then get rid of the evidence on your own property. That's a total reverse order. So, and so at this point, it really doesn't matter. I mean, it would be nice to know who the bones belong to, but it really doesn't matter, because the bottom line is they had no right to give those bones to the Hallback family. They claimed it wasn't Teresa, and it was evidence, and they're not allowed to just give it to the family. And they were supposed to notify Stephen of that, and Stephen would get a final say on, oh yeah, get rid of evidence that could later acquit me when science comes around, that there's new testing. So, and why would they give the bones to the family? Because they're getting rid of them, getting rid of the evidence. Oh, she got buried with, the bones got buried with Teresa. And you got to think too, back then, anything pre-making a murder, everybody thought Stephen was guilty. His own family said he was guilty. Everybody thought he was guilty. Only his parents knew Stephen was innocent. Everybody else thought he was guilty. So nobody would think twice about it. And nobody cared about Stephen. Stephen was representing himself. He didn't have a lawyer. Nobody was looking out for Stephen, except for Stephen and Alan and Dolores. So we wait some more to see if the court is going to give a hearing on this or deny it. Let me scroll through comments here, but I know Christy's been here, so she's probably answering your stuff. All right, I'm just going to scroll down near the bottom because I can see people are being answered, and I don't want to answer stuff that somebody's already answered. Then, yeah, there's Christy already answering everybody. And there's Christy telling me I can just go all the way to the bottom. So that's where we stand today. So we've got Kathleen's response that is posted here on Stephen Avery Project, as well as in MAM Gossip. So you can read it for yourself. And we will continue discussing this and everything else in MAM Gossip. If the court rules or the state responds again, as soon as we get it, we'll post it. And if it's something worth reading and going over, we'll go live again and discuss it with y'all. So, every time we find things, we post it as soon as we get it. So instead of making this a big long thing, and it's Friday and Christy has been replying to everybody, I will just end this live. And yes, today was the deadline. February 1st was the last deadline that Kathleen was given. So we will end this live. If there's anything you want to discuss, you can do it on either Stephen Avery Project. We've got the public page, we've got the closed group, and we have MAM Gossip. So until next time, and have a great weekend. And we're warming up here in Chicagoland, so I guess I'll say stay dry because we're going to flood. We're going to hit like 50 degrees by Monday and rain. So fun. All right. See ya.